Hello, wonderful staff of the Northwest Kidney Center, particularly at the flagship unit in Kent, with a shout out to our friends at the Burien Northwest Kidney Center unit this month. Today we are going to provide an update on vaccinations. Now I know that you all have heard a million talks on vaccinations in the past, and the subject has the potential to be quite boring, so we'll all try to avoid that. But I think it is a timely topic for a few reasons. First, we're rolling out a new hepatitis B vaccine at the Northwest Kidney Center this month. Second, we are entering flu season, and so we'll be offering the flu vaccine to our patients and staff. Third, there have been major changes in the indications for the COVID-19 vaccine. And finally, vaccination has become a very political issue, and a day hardly passes without a story appearing in the newspapers across the country. For example, today there's an article on changes to the FDA's vaccine panel of experts, which is creating a lot of consternation among some public health groups. There are four objectives to today's talk. We'll review vaccine history, understand why vaccine use is controversial these days. I want you to be familiar with the 2025-2026 CDC vaccine recommendations for COVID-19, RSV, influenza, and hepatitis B. And finally, understand the features of the new hepatitis B vaccine, which we're going to use at the Northwest Kidney Center. It's kind of fun to be familiar with the history of vaccination. First vaccine ever created was in 1796. It was a vaccine against smallpox. So Edward Jenner was an English doctor who noticed that the milkmaids who got cowpox didn't catch the more virulent and harmful smallpox, which is a deadly disease. So what he did was he scratched cowpox pus into a boy's arm and later exposed the boy to someone with smallpox, and the boy didn't get sick. As an aside, can you imagine doing that today? Taking a little boy, scratching his arm with cowpox pus, and then exposing him to someone with a deadly disease? You would never get IRB approval for that. Anyway, this is the first vaccine, and from that experience came the word vaccine from vacca, or Latin for cow, and it eventually led to smallpox being eradicated. The next big breakthrough in vaccination came from Louis Pasteur, who's famous for pasteurization or sterilization of products, including milk. Basically, he developed vaccines against rabies and anthrax. So there was a little boy who was bitten by a rabid dog, which at that time was a death sentence. But Pasteur came up with a rabies vaccine that was successful and saved the boy's life. The 20th century was really the golden age for vaccination. Scientists created vaccines for diphtheria and tetanus and pertussis or whooping cough, polio, measles, mumps, and rubella. Jonas Salk came up with the polio vaccine in 1955 that was people were so excited to receive it because they were so afraid of getting polio that they lined up outside of churches and schools to get it. And polio cases dropped dramatically, so it was a huge public health win. Vaccinations led to a huge positive global impact. Smallpox was declared eradicated in 1980, which is the only human disease wiped out by a vaccine. Measles deaths dropped by 94% worldwide between 2000 and 2020 thanks to vaccines. And of course, all of you are familiar with the introduction of mRNA vaccines during the COVID pandemic. Basically, it's a newer technology that allows pharmaceutical companies to make vaccines on a much more rapid scale and may be the future of vaccination. So if vaccines are so great, why is there so much controversy surrounding their development and administration? Just as an editorial comment, I think the main reason is that vaccinations have become politicized, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Political parties embraced or rejected the COVID-19 vaccinations, and people started to view vaccinations sort of as a surrogate for their political ideologies. And this, of course, is a huge mistake. Yes, I agree that public policy is important, but it's not so important that it should exert unnecessary pressure on the medical community or the general population. As an example, many people lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic because they refused to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. But of course, force is not the best way to encourage adherence. As a consequence of politicization of vaccines, some people now view vaccine mandates, say for school, work, and travel, as government overreach. And in countries such as the United States, debates around vaccines often tap into larger ideological battles over individual liberty, parental rights, state control versus personal choice. And so a lot of people who aren't necessarily even opposed to vaccines may resist being told what to do. COVID-19 pandemic changed everything. Basically, the pandemic turned public health decisions into political statements. So getting vaccinated or refusing to be vaccinated became for some a symbol of loyalty to a particular political view. And this led to a lot of mistrust of institutions, the government, pharmaceutical companies, even science itself, and sometimes for good reason, particularly if the vaccines weren't as effective as people thought, or if transparency was not always honored. So that mistrust is channeled into politics, making vaccines part of a broader culture war. So in summary, vaccines became political, not because of what they are, but because of what they represent in today's polarized world. So science, trust, control, choice, identity, all wrapped up into one issue. Let's review the 2025-2026 COVID-19 vaccine updates. Unlike universal vaccination during the pandemic, the U.S. Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices under Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has decided against broad routine administration of the COVID-19 vaccine for all. Vaccination is now based on a shared decision making between individuals and their healthcare provider. If you guys want it, you can get it, but if you don't want it, it's not obligatory. There is no formal recommendation for healthy children or pregnant women. These groups are now not broadly recommended to take the vaccine unless they are high risk or consult a provider. So who is now eligible, according to the FDA, to receive the COVID vaccine? People ages 65 and older, and anyone basically with certain medical conditions that put them at higher risk, including dialysis patients. That said, these are just government recommendations. And if you still want the COVID vaccine, you can just walk into a pharmacy and get it. I mean, it's covered by insurance, even if it's not broadly recommended. And a lot of states differ, but in most, particularly West Coast states, you just walk into any pharmacy, roll up your sleeve, and the pharmacist will give it to you, regardless of federal guidelines. There are a lot of medical groups out there that are not happy with the FDA recommendations regarding COVID vaccines. Some experts and public health groups think that if you don't give the vaccine to everyone, then you're going to have reduced vaccine uptake among high-risk groups, pregnant people, and children. And there are also, concerns that the changing policy that the government has may erode people's trust in the government, and they wonder whether or not the FDA's decision is fully based on evidence. How effective are the vaccines? In 2020, the vaccines were demonstrated in a randomized controlled trial to be highly effective against developing symptomatic disease on the order of 94 to 95% effective. But the virus kept mutating, and now the vaccines are a lot less effective. Plus, immunity has been demonstrated to wane. So you may get a good antibody response to a vaccine, but then within 3 months, the antibody level has fallen to the point that you're susceptible to infection again. The 2023-2024 vaccines were shown by the CDC to be about 54% effective in preventing symptomatic infection. The 2024-2025 vaccines continue to provide protection against severe outcomes like hospitalizations, although with reduced effectiveness compared to earlier years. So again, they provide protection, but they're certainly not a silver bullet, and their immunity wanes over time. All right, let's now talk about what's new with the influenza vaccines. So for the 2025-2026 flu season, the vaccine composition has changed, and that's based on global surveillance of what viruses are circulating. So for egg-based vaccines, that is vaccines that are made using eggs, there are 2 influenza A proteins that are used, one from a strain known as Victoria, and the other one is Croatia, and there's one influenza B protein that's used, and that's known as the Austria variant. For cell culture recombinant-based vaccines, we've got 2 influenza A proteins, Wisconsin, District of Columbia, and 1 B, or the Austria variant. So these vaccines all have 3 influenza proteins in them, therefore we call them trivalent vaccines, although historically the US has offered both trivalent and quadrivalent. So trivalent has 3 common flu antigens, where proteins in quadrivalent vaccines are composed of 4. In the US, all flu vaccines for the 2025-2026 season are trivalent. Basically, the FDA decided to drop the influenza B Yamagata lineage strain for most vaccines because the strain has not been actively circulating. The influenza vaccine comes in two varieties. One is a recombinant injectable vaccine, which previously was approved for adults ages 18 years and older, but now has been approved for children ages 9 years and older. And as before, there's a flu mist, which is a live attenuated nasal spray, which patients can administer themselves or a caregiver can do it. And it's typically for people ages 2 to 49. Another change regarding influenza vaccine for this season is the fact that thimerosal has been removed. Thimerosal is an organomercury compound that has been used historically since the 1930s to prevent bacterial and fungal contamination. Under the direction of RFK, it's been removed from all childhood vaccinations as well as influenza vaccines given potential concern for potential adverse reactions. Does mean that if you don't have thimerosal, that you're removing a preservative, and that may affect the shelf life of the vaccine and affect supply chain and distribution. Indications for the flu vaccine are the same as before. Everyone's 6 months of age and older. All right, now let's talk about the RSV vaccine. The respiratory syncytial virus is a common respiratory virus. It can cause serious illness, particularly in the young and old, so in infants and older people, as well as those with weakened immune system or chronic conditions, including kidney disease. It is a recombinant protein vaccine targeting the RSV F protein. It was FDA approved in 2023. It is currently indicated for adults ages 60 and greater, as well as for pregnant women and infants. Randomized controlled trials have shown RSV vaccines significantly reduce hospitalization as well as severe RSV illness in older adults and infants. Common side effects include injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. And this vaccine was approved, as I said, in 2023 after large-scale clinical trials. We do not administer it at the Northwest Kidney Center, but our dialysis patient would certainly qualify to receive it and are encouraged to do so. And now let's discuss hepatitis B vaccine. The hepatitis B vaccine is recommended for all dialysis patients. And that's because it's such a common problem. Worldwide, it's estimated to be prevalent at around 7.5% of all dialysis patients. And that prevalence varies geographically. It's around 7.5% in Asia, 4.3% in North America, and 9.73% in South America. So a lot of dialysis patients have hepatitis B. There are several reasons why hepatitis B has been such a problem and has been so prevalent in dialysis units. One, dialysis patients have compromised immune systems. They are also exposed to bodily fluids in a healthcare setting, and hepatitis B is a very tenacious virus. It can live on a countertop for days. Historically, we didn't always have the best infection control practice in dialysis units. That, of course, has been changed, but you cannot share equipment. You cannot share space. I mean, that's why we isolate our Hep B patients. We no longer reuse dialysis filters, certainly don't reuse dialysis lines. And historically, there have been low vaccination rates among dialysis patients. All that has changed. Now we administer hepatitis B vaccine to all of our patients, and we've seen an excellent reduction in the prevalence of hepatitis B. The FDA still recommends universal vaccination in the general population of all people ages 19 to 59 against hepatitis B. You can still get it if you're above the age of 60 and you have risk factors. For example, you're on dialysis, or say you live with someone who has hepatitis B. There are several products in the market, including Injirix B, which is what we've historically used at the kidney center. It's a 3-dose series, typically at 0, 1, and 6 months. But we're switching this month to one called Heplisav B, which is just a 2-dose adult vaccine series with 1 month spacing. Heplisav B vaccine prevents infection by all known subtypes of hepatitis B virus. It was approved by the U.S. FDA in 2017 for adults ages 18 and above. Administered as an intramuscular injection in the arms, given as a 2-dose series, again with the 2 doses spaced by 1 month. We are switching to this hepatitis B formulary this month. And it combines recombinant hepatitis B surface antigen with a novel adjuvant called CBG 1018, which is a synthetic oligodeoxynucleotide that stimulates something called the toll-like receptor 9. Anyway, all that says that it enhances immune response. In the general population in clinical trials, about 95% of those receiving the two-dose hepatitis B series developed seroprotection. So they had an elevated hepatitis B surface antibody compared to about 80 to 81% of those receiving the standard three-dose and GRX-B. And for populations that were traditionally less responsive to the vaccine, hepatitis B still showed higher seroprotection than in GRX-B. So why are we switching? Well, it appears to be a more effective vaccine. And as you know, several dialysis patients don't seroconvert. They don't develop immunity to hepatitis B. So this may be a way to address that. We get to achieve immunity faster, just after 1 month, and with only 2 doses as opposed to 3, so you don't need the extra dose at 6 months. The quicker vaccination schedule allows for patients to be vaccinated sooner, so it reduces the risk of infection, and it's also just more convenient. Fewer shots are easier for the staff. It's a very safe vaccine. It's been studied in thousands of people. Common side effects within 7 days include injection site pain, fatigue, headache, malaise, systemic symptoms, and serious adverse events are rare and similar to what we saw with GRX-B. Okay, it's time to summarize what we've learned today. The first vaccine in human history was a smallpox vaccine developed in 1796 by Edward Jenner. Vaccines are unfortunately controversial because they have been politicized. It's a shame to politicize medicine. COVID-19 vaccine is now FDA approved for people ages 65 and beyond, or anyone who is at risk for complications, including dialysis patients. COVID vaccine is thought to reduce severity, but it's less helpful in preventing infection. The influenza vaccines are all trivalent in the 2025-2026 flu season, and they no longer contain thimerosal. The RSV vaccine is indicated for adults above the age of 80, for pregnant women and infants, and have been shown to reduce the risk of hospitalization and severe infection. Hepatitis B, historically of high prevalence in the dialysis population, is indicated for all dialysis patients, and in the general population, all adults, pregnant women, and infants. Finally, Northwest Kidney Center is switching this month to hepatitis B vaccine, which has a higher rate of seroprotection, at least in the general population. Okay, time for an innocuous quiz. Question number 1, who created the first vaccine? You're correct. That guy did, and his name is Edward Jenner, and he invented the smallpox vaccine. Question number 2, according to the FDA, who is now eligible to receive the 2025-2026 COVID vaccine? That's right. So anyone ages 65 or above, and anyone with significant comorbidities, which includes end-stage renal disease. Okay, question number 3. What are 2 features of the 2025-2026 influenza vaccine? Well, one of them you get if you just look at this slide, and that is that we no longer use thimerosal, which is a mercury-based preservative. And this year, all of the vaccines are trivalent, meaning they have 3 antigens, so they are not quadrivalent, which has 4 antigens. Question number 4, should dialysis patients receive the RSV vaccine? The answer, according to the Food and Drug Administration, is yes. So anyone with a high-risk condition should receive the RSV vaccine. Final question. Why is the Northwest Kidney Center switching from Engerix B vaccine to Heplisav B vaccine? That's right. So there are 2 doses rather than 3, so you can complete the series in 4 weeks, which means that the patients can achieve immunity faster, and there's also a higher rate of seroconversion with the new vaccine. This concludes the September 2025 in-service for the Northwest Kidney Center. Thank you for your attention, for your wonderful care of our patients. Hope you guys have a great start to your fall.